Okay, hello, I'm making another one of my videos about the KOS system, the Kerbal Operating System little scripting language thing that comes as a mod someone wrote for Kerbal Space Program. And it's a very awesome little mod. It's still fairly alpha at this point, needs a few extra things, but, it's still usable as long as you pay attention to the various bugs and stuff, but it's great. So, what I'm doing now, in the past I've made a few videos about my attempts to make a landing script that's supposed to be all-purpose, but what I'm doing this time is making an entry for a contest. On the Kerbal forums, Thunderfoot made, or Thurfoot or Thunderfoot, I'm not really sure what that is, he made a, or she, I don't really know, made a contest, the Automated Mission Challenge. And what this contest is you have to try to get, using nothing but the automated scripting language and no manual inputs, you have to get either to another SOI body other than Kerbin, if you want full score, or just Kerbin if you want partial score. You get a point for getting to any other SOI anywhere, like getting around to the moon. 3 points if you can get a stable orbit around it. 10 points if you can land on it, and 15 points if you can get back home. I'm going to go for the whole thing. I'm going to try and get all of them to score. The special details of the challenge is that you can only control the craft via the terminal, and only typing commands in at times where things are stable, and that includes when you're landed on the ground, or starting at the launch pad, or in a stable orbit where you could time warp forever and nothing would ever crash. You're not going to hit anything or anything. Only under those circumstances can you type think commands into the console. Everything else has to be automated. So, how do I do that? Before I begin, I want to show one thing in my code. I'm not going to run you through all the code here, that would take forever. But the one thing I am going to show that matters is that people might think I'm being a little cheaty because they're going to see me go switch to archive and then start running a command. And they're going to think, but you're running from the archive. That's not right. You need to run from the local volume. Well, no, not really, because of what I'm doing here. The only thing I ever do when I run on the archive is I run this program here called sim radio delay. And all it does is you give it a command in a text form. It will wait whatever the proper light speed delay is for the current distance to Kerbin. Pad an extra 3 seconds on top of that, just to pretend that there's some handshaking problems. Wait that long, and then execute that command. So, by running through this, it makes it utterly impossible to try to directly control the craft in fiddly ways. You can only really do this when things aren't dynamically, importantly changing. So whenever you see this block of text show up on the screen in the terminal window, you'll know that I'm doing this. I'm running this thing. It prints the command it's going to do, what its distance is, and then a little seconds timer here that counts down until it actually then executes the command, using this self-modifying code trick where you can log text to a file and then run it like it was a command. So everything I do is going to be run through that, and this is an example of the master script that controls everything else you're about to see. And, for example, when I first take off, I say sim radio delay, copy the load ascend program, sim radio delay, run it, and that's just a program that contains a lot of copy statements to get all the software onto the local volume. Then run it on the local volume. Then after it finally finishes, delete all those bits from the local volume to free it up again. Wait for me to type Alt 9, and then do the same thing for the home and transfer. And when that's all finally done, wait for me to hit Alt 9, do the same thing for getting captured on the moon, and so on and so forth for all the steps. That's all I do on the archive, is tell the remote drive copy some software to it, and then tell it to run the software that I told it to copy to itself. That's all that happens here. So don't be thinking because you see me use the archive that I'm being cheaty. I'm not. This is what I'm doing. On a side note, if you're curious to know about this syntax highlighting thing, I'm kind of an old school Unix person, and so I like to edit my code using VI or VIM, which is a GUI version of VI, an old school editor. And one of the things you can do with it is you can make a little syntax file that contains regular expressions that define all the parts of speech of a language, and it'll read that and you use it to do the syntax highlighting for you. So I have this set up. I'll probably include a link to that in the video as well, if in the rare case that you actually use VI too and might be interested in it. Okay, enough of that, back to the actual thing. So here I am on the launch pad. This is my thing that's going to go to the moon. It's got a bottom stage, a middle stage that it'll use once it gets up high, and then everything from this point on up will actually get to the moon. This large bit will land on it, and then this tiny little bit will come off of it. I will be doing some science while I'm there. I have an action group set up to activate this science pod and this thermometer, and that's the only place where I'll actually do anything, where I type anything in other than using the console, because those will cause a dialog box to pop up that there's no way to get rid of. I hope that doesn't constitute breaking the rule. If it does, I'll go through the effort of doing this entire video again without doing that. It's just a little extra I did. Okay, so here is the thingy. I'm deliberately recording this at a fairly low resolution because I want the text here to be fairly large and easy to see. Okay. So, switch to the archive. Bing. Run. Challenge. Mission. Starting at step 0. Go. And you can see here's that light speed delay thing before it runs all the commands that load the software up. Now it's going to run the actual ascent script. And the ascent script is now running. Getting some body stat data. And there we go. Now it's on the countdown. It's at 5, 4, and 3, you can see 2 and 1, and there we go. Incidentally, I will also apologize at this point for any hissing you're hearing in the video. I still don't actually have a separate external microphone, so I'm recording this through the laptop's microphone in the lid, which of course means that you get a bit of laptop fan noise in with it. I don't record videos often enough for me to bother, going out to get a separate external microphone for it. So you'll just have to put up with that, I guess. Okay, so lifting, lifting, lifting. May as well take a few screenshots while I'm at it so I can post them. If you're curious what's going on over here, time from liftoff in seconds. Desired apoapsis is the parameter I fed into the program saying that's where I'm trying to launch to. The profile end speed is what would orbital velocity in a circular orbit be at that apoapsis, which it calculated. I didn't tell it that. Terminal velocity here is based upon the air pressure. What's the velocity where I am now? Gravity turn start is what altitude will it begin, which you can see it already actually did, doing its turn. It's not properly following a technically correct gravity turn, but it's good enough. It's actually following a square root of speed rule, so it'll be completely horizontal when it reaches this speed, or completely vertical when it's at a speed of 0, and it scales between the two of those using a square root thing. My current compass heading, the pitch heading, and my current speed. At some point this speed will suddenly jump because it'll flip to orbital, and it'll usually do it a little bit sooner than the nav ball does. Anytime that there's a loss of fuel, it automatically stages as it goes. So at some point you'll see this suddenly jump up, and when it does, it'll pitch down a little bit. It's now, there it jumped. Now it's at orbital speed, even though the nav ball's not yet. And the pitch jumped down just a little bit because it suddenly thought it was going faster. This is not the most complicated part of my script. The bit that does the ascent and all the other bits of this are actually pretty simple and kind of tailor-made for this mission. The one that's generic and open-ended is the lander, because that's the one I've been working on for like a month before I actually did this challenge. So all these other bits I kind of cobbled together recently. So they're not quite as robust yet. Not really much to talk about here. Hey, look, we're flying. And we're still flying. Yay, flying. If we switch out to the map view, you'll see it's pushing the apoapsis up, but kind of slowly, because I gave it a fairly, minimally necessary engine. Let's get this up. Whoa, hey, that's a graphics glitch. I don't like it when I start seeing that glitch. That usually means it's going to stay that way forever. Ugh. Okay, well. Oh good, that fixed it. Okay, so still thrusting, still thrusting. It will turn itself off at some point fairly soon here. Its decision as to when to stop is based on two things have to be true. The apoapsis has to get up to this number, and it currently has to be in an area where the terminal velocity is at least 6 times higher than its current speed. In other words, it has to be an area that's so thin it probably won't hurt the apoapsis height at all to drift at that point. And you can see it's almost out of the atmosphere here, but not quite. I tried to time this so it gets really close to right on. There we go. So there's still a little bit of atmosphere, but not much. It got up to 80K. If you go look at the map again, you can see there it is, 80K. The script is now saying coast till apoapsis. It'll wait until it gets there before it does a circularization. Oh, hey, it noticed that it's out of air and it opened up the solar panels. NA, you can see there. And as it's going to take about 60 seconds, time that just a wee bit. Warping is also one of the things side of that's really more of a factor of boredom rather than actually trying to alter the behavior of the craft. Could be getting close, lifting periapsis, map view, you can see it. Take another screenshot there. And this doesn't have a whole lot of fuel in it itself. They make it all the way to the moon. Any moment now it should... Come on. Or that it had to do. If we look at stable abscess of 81, periapsis 6, I told it when it's up, I told it I'd exactly match. Which I could have told Killer Islet not to. Yes, actually, there's no point. I just, to get the points of saying, hey, there's the periapsis, there's the apoapsis, it's stable. Okay, so next step. What's the next step? Press action group 9 to continue. It's copying the angle until Hohmann and some other utilities I use for that, and program. And now it will run the transfer program with this. Waiting transfer angle, 106 degrees. When that, it will do burn, 107 degrees is telling you, if you look at the map view, is 100, and now it's 109, 109 degrees ahead of the optimal burn point. So if you go 100 back behind me, about here, it's saying that would be about the right point to do my burn to get to the moon. And if you zoom out the map, you can see, yep, sure enough, that's true. That would be about the right point. So it's constantly updating that check because the moon's moving while I'm drifting too. And when that number finally hits 0 or pretty close to 0, that's when it'll do the burn. So let's accelerate that time a bit. We'll drift around the planet some. You'll notice the software still runs under time warp, which I think is weird. But there it goes, and it's still calculating. It'll flip to negative pretty soon here. There, it flipped negative. You can slow down a bit. And it's starting to get near 0. I do this by degrees, not by time. Technically speaking, you could try to calculate how long it will take to get there, but when your orbit is elliptical, the math to do that's a bit messier, and it wasn't necessary for the challenge to be successful, so I didn't bother putting that in yet. So it's just based on the degrees. When it hits the right point, it'll burn based on that. It doesn't actually know how to predict how long that will be. Let me zoom in here. 7 degrees away from where to do it. You can see the moon coming up and getting pretty close. 6 degrees away from when to do it. Let's just jump a little ahead here to make it a little less dull. Come on, move, 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 move. 4.7, come on, just a little further. 2.5, okay, I'll stop accelerating at this point. I'll just let it run normally. So here we go. So, when are we gonna burn? We're gonna burn, come on, burn, burn. And there it goes. Flip to the map, you'll see my position here is, yeah, it's about the right spot to do a burn to the moon, sure enough. Now this is a fairly weak engine, which you would expect for fuel efficiency, you'd want that. I'm gonna be here a while, waiting for this burn to happen. So I'm gonna physics warp through this and do a little less dull. At this point you may hear the engines get a little stuttery. That's not my script doing that. That's an effect that KSP itself has when I try to accelerate time and I'm running a script and I'm running video capture. The poor CPU is just overtaxed at that point. Alright, let me slow down that physics warp a bit. Nope, not yet, but getting close. Of course, it always goes a little faster once you've got it highly elliptical. So I'll just leave it at normal speed here. You can see it going up. Now, what the script is going to do here, you can't detect an encounter unless there's a maneuver node. This is the only place in the whole thing I actually use a maneuver node. I do the trick of a maneuver node turning on and off, on and off, on and off, so that it can keep checking the encounter. You'll see that starting to do that here in a bit. It'll slow the throttle way down as it gets close and start making maneuver nodes flip on and off here. I don't know how well this flickering will show up in the video, but you can see it right here, making maneuver nodes over and over again to see if it's gotten close. And you can tell it is, thrusting extremely weakly here, trying not to overshoot. Should be getting real close here, and it'll stop at any moment, I hope. There it goes. Stops, and now it's unloading the transfer software. Get the next step going. And the next step is simply that it's going to execute a wait command and then run the capture. The wait command is just going to say wait until my SOI body is the moon. Yeah, wait until body equals moon name. And so it's just going to sit there like that forever until I'm at the moon. But I'm going to take another screenshot here. You'll see that my periapsis there is 15, which is good. Time to time warp through all of this. And notice as soon as it got there, it started running more software over here. Alright, so if you look here, my periapsis is at 12. For some reason, the predicted periapsis is always slightly higher than when you actually get there. I'm not really sure why that is. But at any rate, periapsis is 12. That's kind of low, but it'll work. This thing is waiting until it actually gets to periapsis, so let's, again, time accelerate a bit. Getting pretty close. Yep, there it is, starting to turn around. Burning until captured. It's not burning until circular. There's no reason to bother doing that. It's just burning until captured. It's guessing that it's captured by calculating the escape velocity, by the way, because I can't quite at this point, I can't quite read the apoapsis and find out whether or not it's an escape velocity or not. That ability doesn't exist. But what I can do is check my speed versus the escape velocity, and when it's well underneath escape velocity, stop, which is what this did. So if you go look at the map, I am now in a captured orbit. There it is. Apoapsis is 702, whereas periapsis is 12. It's pretty low, but it is stable for the moon. That'll work. I can orbit around like that forever if I felt like it. I will zip around here first. Okay, so step finished, press AG9. Sure, AG9. Copying something called load descend, running it, that'll get a bunch of other bits of software to show up, and now running descend. If you've seen my earlier videos, this is almost exactly the same script I was using there. I've only tweaked it a little since then. It claimed the periapsis was too high and it had to burn a little retro to correct it, to get it the way it liked it. It did that for just a brief moment, you may have seen that. And now it will start when the altitude is below 20K. If I look at this, it burned just a tiny bit to bring this down just a hair. Okay, so let's bring that low altitude up here. We go out to this view. It's claiming it'll do something once this gets below 20K. Yep, sure enough, there it goes. It is now beginning its descent. And here we go. I don't really have a witty script, you know, for describing this whole thing in a story. That's the one particular goal I didn't go for in the challenge, just because I thought I can either explain what the code is doing, or I can make a witty script. I sort of can't do both. So I decided I should just explain it rather than make a funny story. I'm not good at funny stories anyway. Ooh, that's pretty. I kind of like that screenshot. It looks like it's going to be heading for some kind of bumpy land here. Let me look at the... oh, it's just the middle of that crater. That'll be okay. Appears I've landed there before. Or debris. Oh, it's one of my earlier tests. I see. KOS Challenger debris. That was from a test that I should have labeled oops. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about the descent here because I've talked about it a lot in other videos, and this is pretty much the same software as there. It's a generic piece of software that works on any body. It's not specific to the moon, and it's not specific to a craft. I have had problems in situations where you have a very low thrust-to-weight ratio. It doesn't quite know how to adjust the throttle correctly. It's a little bit goofy when you do that. So it's not quite perfect everywhere, but it works most places I've tried it. Printing out all this information lets you can watch it as you fall in. I think I will physics warp this slightly because this is getting a little dull to watch. Interestingly, when you physics warp, the script still runs at the same speed, but now it thinks the clock is going faster. It thinks it's taking longer between iterations. But it will still function. Getting close. I should stop physics warping here. I'm trying to find my shadow, because that usually makes a nice, prettier looking landing. If you can see it in the view. I can't find it. Where is it? Ah, there it is. And it didn't like that land, thought it was a little too slopey, so it went sideways a bit first. probably right on the threshold of what it'll accept for slope. Yeah, that was just a little bit of slope. I tried having it land somewhere particularly flat. Coming down nice and slow-like. That was my phone. Here we go. Should be landing any moment now. Come on. Come on. There we go. It's going to sit there for a few seconds holding it still before it lets go of the script. Okay, unloaded everything, and it is now finished, and there it is on the ground. Ta-da! Alright, step finished, press AG9, there we go. What's the next thing it's going to do? It's going to run Action Group 2, it says, and there it did. Action Group 2 collected science. That is now finished. Press it again. Oops, you get it focused in the right location so I can press it again. There we go. And now it's going to get the Ascent script back on, the same one it used when it got off of Kerbin in the first place. You get a nice zoomed out view here. 9, 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go! So you can see I'm using that little piddly engine that only gives you a thrust of 30, because, hey, it's good enough for this. Normally when I'm doing operations on the moon, I actually prefer to be at an even lower altitude. It's trying to shoot for 20K. I prefer to be even lower for my orbits, nice and low to the ground. But the reason I didn't do it here is simply because you can't time warp very well when you're too low to the ground. It won't let you. And it can be really annoying to, be capped at 5 times time warp and have to wait a really long time to get around. So I went a little higher so I would avoid that. There it is, coasting to apoapsis again. Apoapsis is currently at 20. And because there is no air, it doesn't have to take that into account for dragging purposes. It knows once this is 20, it will stay there. So let's give it a little more time warp. You can see it counting down its weight here. Alright, let's go back to normal. We're getting close. And there it kicks in, trying to lift up the periapsis to match. Let's watch that move on the map. And sure enough, there it goes again. And going from 20K to 49K, that is stable. Let's screenshot that. Finished the Ascent script. Now in stable orbit. Let's press AG9. Now it's going to load something called Escape and run that. Waiting until good escape burn position detected. This deliberately runs a bit slowly, because the numbers tend to wiggle a lot if you try to run it too quickly. So it only iterates every 5 seconds or so. There we go. Now it's actually doing its work. Now, what is happening here is the following. If you go out to the map, what I'm trying to do is decide when to do my escape burn from the moon. Here's Kerbin. Here's the moon. If I'm trying to go back to Kerbin, I would like to escape going backward against the moon's direction. If I'm trying to go escape and go somewhere else other than the moon, or other than Kerbin, I'm trying to go somewhere farther away, I want to escape in the direction of the moon. So would I like to burn on this side to create a big long ellipse going this way to escape, or would I like to burn on this side to make a big long ellipse going this way to escape? And that's what the parameters to the burn function do, or that's what the parameters to the capture function do. I told it I would like to go deeper in, and that I'm currently in a prograde orbit. So calculating the fact that I want to go deeper in and I'm in a prograde orbit, what it does to decide where I am on the planet, which side I'm on, or I'm sorry, on the moon, is it actually uses the moon's parent, Kerbin, to decide that. It knows that if my current prograde direction is pointing at Kerbin, then that means I'm on this side. If my current prograde direction is pointing directly away from Kerbin, then I'm on this side. And that's how it figures out what side of the moon it's on. I tried doing it based on the moon's own velocity to say I want to be where my up vector and the moon's velocity match. But that didn't work because if you're currently orbiting the moon, then the moon is the center of your universe and its velocity gets reported as 0. So this pointing at the parent body or pointing away from the parent body to figure out which side I'm on is what I ended up using instead. So I get the vector of my velocity and I get the vector of the Kerbin position relative to me, and then do a dot product to figure out what the cosine between the two of them is, and I want to burn at the point that that cosine is either maximally close to +1 or minimally close to -1, depending on which of these two kinds I'm doing. So that's why this is constantly calculating. Cosine toward my parent-ishness is currently this. When that hits as large as it's ever going to get, I will fire. I can't just test for when it's 1, because if my orbit isn't particularly flat here, if I'm in a highly inclined weird orbit, then I'm never necessarily pointing directly at Kerbin. So what I'm looking for is the point at which I'm closest to pointing at Kerbin. So that's why I'm watching the change in this cosine, and I want to see when it flips from negative to positive or positive to negative to indicate that I've hit a maximal of some point, and that's when it will choose to do the burn. That will detect when it's back over here again. So I will time warp here, and you will see that it's constantly updating this number. And it's getting bigger and more negative now as I get to here. And now as I start coming around the other side, it'll start getting smaller in magnitude again, but still negative. Yep, there it's going smaller in magnitude. And over on this side, it'll start getting positive pretty soon, basically when I cross this point here. Yep, positive, and slowly getting bigger. Let me slow this down a bit. So when I hit the point where I am going to be right there, when I'm aiming right at Kerbin, is when it should kick off. Zoom it forward just a little bit more. Nope, okay, just a little more. Wow, okay, no, I'm actually not there yet. Time warp a little more. Should pick up any second now. Really close. I'll just go ahead and let this run normal time. There it went. Burning until on escape path. So there it is, doing a little bit of a burn. See? And if you look at the map view, sure enough, it's burning until it's on escape path. And again, this is a fact that I can't see this apoapsis and this periapsis unless I have a maneuver node present, and that's why I'm not burning all the way to bring this down right now. I didn't bother putting the code in to make a maneuver node to read the periapsis here. So I'm just going to go ahead and escape at this route and then do the rest of the burning when I get closer. It's simple, but it works. So here we go. And here it's telling me that it finished. Alright, the last step is to run a very crude descender. It's not the complicated one I used on the moon. This is just going to say, I have parachutes, I'll just use the parachutes. So there we go. Dumb chute descend. And dumb chute descend is now running. It recognizes that the periapsis isn't quite low enough yet, so it'll do a little retro burning to help that out. Oops, looks like I didn't quite wait long enough. Oh well, it'll still work. So if you look here, it's bringing this down. Down, down, down. And that's low enough for the aerial braking to work. Probably a little too low, actually, but hey, it worked. Autopilot has no work to do now but wait, which is true. So let's time warp our way. Actually, I would like to take another screenshot of this. There we go. Okay. I'm not sure why it's telling me that. I think that's a bug. Not sure why those windows popped up there. Accidentally trying to activate Action Group 2, but notice I said cancel, so I didn't act. Nothing left for the script to rely on the shoots for. Just warp this a little bit. Oh. That's warpy. Warpy. Physics warp. And when code's not doing any more work, the thing it's still doing. I've enjoyed my, obviously. Down. Physics warping. So this, is that it's got this much. I kind of. Oops. Tip long as you're scripting program ended. I'm going to go to the Space Center and it's even coverable from just that. There. Recovered it. I'm